Look, I'm absolutely delighted to welcome Virna, Charles, Nokuthula, Cassandra, Alice, and Camille to today's keynote. I think it's the first time I've ever been involved in a collaborative keynote, so I think this is absolutely fantastic. And it's absolutely right that you're talking about an inclusive and accessible curriculum, of which collaboration is part of that, isn't it? Learning about each other and working with each other is part of that work. And this ties really nicely into the development that we're making around our Liverpool curriculum framework, which was to put inclusive curriculum as a principle now within our framework. So hopefully this was going to kickstart a lot of our work over the next year or so. So without further ado, I'll hand over to Virna, and then I know that you will all introduce yourselves at certain points, but I'm really looking forward to this. So over to you.
Thank you so much. Could you signal that you can hear me? Yeah. It's clear. Good. Thank you very much. There had to be a last minute, technological panic. But anyway, I'm here. I'm glad I made it. Just to tell you that, well, first of all, obviously, thank you very much for inviting me and our other colleagues as well. So as you said, this is going to be very much a collaborative discussion. And I would like to invite the audience as well to interact with us through the chat. Unfortunately, as you know, when you're presenting full screen with Teams, you can't really see the chat. So it's not that I'm trying to ignore you, it's just I actually can't see the chat. But because I've got all these other colleagues and various sort of helpers, so maybe, please feel free, Charles, Camille, and Alice Nokuthula to interact in the chat with the audience even while I speak is not a problem. So I'll be very happy to connect with anybody who's interested in what we're going to be talking about on Twitter, because I'm quite active on Twitter. So I'm going to be talking to you about inclusive learning design, which is my passion, I would say. So I really want to start by asking you, how are you? How are you feeling today? Personally, professionally, any way you want. So in the chat, you can choose your mood for the day. But because I can't see it, could any of my sort of helpers, colleagues, read their letters and numbers that people indicate? I'm going to tell you how I feel. I think mine is C1.
And someone is B2.
Okay.
We have B4.
Oh, good. People are feeling happy.
Yeah, we have 1C.
Okay.
We have C2. F3.
Whoever put C2, hello.
E4 and E4.
Okay. Very nice. There's a variety then. There's a variety.
Okay.
Fantastic. Right. So I like starting with a little check-in because we are human beings. At the end of, for when I say, if I talk about the end of the academic year, forgive me if you're in the Southern Hemisphere or in places where the academic year works differently. I'm referring, of course, to the fact that in the UK, we are coming to the end of the academic year. Obviously, there's always a certain fatigue, but in a pandemic year, then there's more than fatigue. And not only fatigue, there is also still quite a lot of uncertainty. So I don't know how you feel in terms of, like looking ahead, but I think we do feel we're in this liminal space. We don't know exactly. I mean, policies change every day from the government, which affect the way we can operate. And but I saw a comment on Twitter, which I want to share. I am going to read it. I hope you don't mind. The reason I'm going to read it is because some people may have very small screens or may not be able to read the slide for different reasons. So somebody said, very concerned with the bumpy landing we might be facing in the fall. It is similar to being a pilot revisiting an airplane terminal that has undergone significant renovations in a new model plane. Lots that are familiar, we're familiar, but that landing might not be as smooth as you remember. So when I read that, I thought, yeah, I really identify with this. So our modes of working and interacting both with colleagues and students have literally been reconfigured in major ways. When 2 years ago we talked about blended learning, it meant something. Now blended learning means something completely different. So looking ahead, obviously, I think we need to rest in the summer if you're going towards the summer where you live, and if it's your summer break, we absolutely need to rest. But also we're thinking about next academic year. So in this time together, firstly, I'd like to discuss broad ideas about inclusive learning design, because I think this is very relevant and can be very helpful for us, obviously going ahead, yeah? Why it matters and my research in this area. And then secondly, I shall discuss the 3 R's of inclusive learning design, and I will discuss their what, why, and how. And you will hear live 4 case studies from 4 colleagues who I will introduce gradually to show really the praxis of these 3 R's. And finally, of course, I hope we have time to have a little chat and hear what you think about these ideas. So I would like to ask you, just don't worry, there's no right or wrong, but I just want to get a feel for what your views. What is inclusivity to you? And what is learning design? So if you don't mind to put it in the chat, and if anybody, as the ideas come, if you can read some of them, I'll give you the time to think about it and to type it. Any ideas being offered? Because I can't see the chat.
Virna, we've got stuff like inclusivity, everybody welcome, enabled to participate. Yes. People feeling that something is for them. Level playing field. Learning design, we've got one here, designing those experiences. Yeah.
Exactly.
Treat people equally, irrespective of cultural diversity, ethnicity. No one's shut out, everybody's welcome and able to participate.
Yes, awesome, thank you very much. You can keep going. Just because of time, I will also suggest a definition. Now, I am actually doing a project with, in fact, these colleagues who've joined me today. And the project is actually writing a book. I've been working on this for about a year now, and it will be published by Routledge, hopefully coming out in spring 2022. And of course, I have to, because it's called, the title is Inclusive Learning Design, I will need to define these words. So it's not easy, because the word inclusivity can mean so many different things to different people, and also learning design. So really, in a nutshell, my view of inclusivity is that of a social model. It's more akin to an ethos or a value than a method. And it aims to grant each student with their intersectional diversity full membership to education, to enable them to gain full membership to society later on, depending, of course, on which age we're talking about. But yeah, so that's how I view inclusivity. It's not just a technique. It's really like a mode, like a mindset, And what is learning design? Again, this is not easy to define, but I would say at the moment I'm on this definition, it might change later on, is a process that encompasses the thoughtful planning and intentional choices regarding a learner's journey. For example, the context, environment, content and delivery, inverted commas, the assessment and the evaluation also of that experience. So I chose learning design rather than curriculum, let's say, or course, just because it's wider. So learning obviously encompasses all aspects of that experience. So inclusive learning design, I think personally, should be a priority, a bit like was mentioned before. Yeah, it should be a priority for all of us, because if we are not including, if we're not creating inclusive experiences, it means some of our students at least are left out, and so they will not be able to succeed, maybe. So let me go forward. Let me see. So I want to show you this tree. this tree is actually a way to visualize this research I'm doing on inclusive learning design. So the approach is roots to shoots. So I've taken the word inclusive and I've turned it into an acronym. So at the base, those roots, every letter is, can be taken. I found a way of wording that letter into a finer grain, a more detailed inclusivity value. And then it goes into the shoots or the branches. It's roots to shoots. So I'm really very much focusing on the roots to start this process off, and then going into the shoots. And what do they mean? So I'm going to share just a little bit of this. So the values at the bottom, inclusive, the I is for intentionally equitable. And both those words, honestly, you could talk for hours. So this intentionality, really thinking about, is not by chance, is on purpose and with purpose. And then equitable, so which is even beyond, in a way, inclusivity, really, as somebody said, leveling the playing field. Nurturing, this links to well-being and a holistic view of learning. Co-created, I think we've seen this a lot, this partnership that we need to have with different stakeholders. We need the students involved as partners. We need industry or people in the wider world, communities. We need teams to work together internally. We need networks. So this co-creation is a little bit sort of a step ahead of sort of further than, let's say, just collaboration, is really creating the experience together, involving people, other people. Liberating, I love this, and liberating structures. There's a whole field actually of study on this, but the idea of this liberation is, to me, it links very much to the idea of decolonization and really understanding how both in content and in mode, we can provide a different experience so that all the students can actually blossom. We don't have to do what we've always done. We can actually liberate maybe ourselves and create better experiences. User-friendly, of course, this is very important because then it obviously touches accessibility. And we're going to talk today about universal design for learning. Socially responsible, what I was saying before, linking to communities, linking studies with the, let's call it, real world, what's really happening, so that it's relevant. Again, this is one of the things we talk about today. Integrative or integrative, I've checked, you can say both. And in many different ways. Of course, we need to integrate research and literature into what we do to have a stronger, perhaps, evidence base. But also, what I was saying just now, integrate, for example, work with study. Integrate different experiences that the students have. So integrative can have many dimensions. Values-based, of course, this is exactly what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to highlight the values and help the students also understand what values they have, and perhaps help them develop some values that they are not so aware of, or maybe they haven't focused on. For example, the next one, the E, the ecological. How about providing an experience which is ecological, in the sense of, I'm sure you've heard of the Sustainable Development Goals. What place could they have in our programs or in our courses? And even in terms of making really ecological choices in the way we use resources, and even in the way we use human resources. So ecological, again, can be very wide. So these are the values of this symbolical tree. And then you go, if you look at the trunk, it says roots to shoots, and then it goes into 3 different branches. And the first one is context. This is about the environment, the setup of the experience, and welcoming the students, the transitions. Content, what we actually teach or what would like the students to learn. How can we make that inclusive? And then assessment, so the outputs that we expect from the students, and then the feedback also related to that. So this is an overview of this learning design tree. I appreciate that if it's the first time you see it, obviously this takes time to digest and fully sort of understand. But in the context of this, I wanted to highlight 3 R's of inclusive learning design. And the 3 R's are responsive, research-rich, and relevant. So we're going to look at those, also having these live case studies. And I just wanted to highlight the fact that they connect to the roots totally. In a way, we could say these 3 R's are a bit of like the gist of all of that I just went through. Because, for example, responsive, when you think about intentionally equitable, research-rich when you think about integrative, and relevant when you think about the ways that we can, for example, social responsible, we can make teaching, learning, and assessment relevant to the students. So we're going to be talking about those 3 R's, and I'm going to start with the first one, responsive. So what does it mean, responsive? Well, mostly I would say we could define it as responding to student needs. So what needs? Cultural, social, and cognitive. But how can we respond if we don't first listen? Somebody said that's why we have 2 ears but 1 mouth. We're supposed to listen double what we speak. That's a good mantra for life, maybe. So we need to be able to listen to the students. What are they telling us? What feedback, evaluation, ideas are they proposing? And then, of course, we can respond. But why does it matter? Well, I would like to point to, for example, the work of Maha Bali, who you might know from the American University in Cairo, Egypt. And she has written about intentionally equitable hospitality. And there is a reference right at the end that will point you to where you can find this. But what really she's talking about is the fact that, if you reflect on those words, intentionally equitable hospitality, what she says is really traditionally HE and universities have not been so hospitable to everybody. So if we want to change that culture, again, talking about mindset, we need to be intentional in the way that we are hospitable and equitable towards our students. And she gives a few examples. So I'm going to just have a little pause here to make you just think about that question I put at the bottom, to think about what would be or what is the opposite of responsive. You're welcome to put something in the chat if you want, but I just thought, it's good that we talk about responsive, but why don't we also think about what happens if we are not responsive? So what are we if we're not responsive? I'll just give you a few seconds. So if there's anything in the chat, please let me know. Yeah, just to speak out, any of my helpers. But really, when you think about it, the direct opposite would be irresponsive, which is like a dead body, for example. But I would say like somebody apathetic or uninterested. That's somebody. That's the opposite.
Virna, some people are saying indifferent, blind or indifferent, distance from reality. Preachy, fixed. This is from the chat.
Thank you. Yeah. Yeah, that's it. Yeah. Thank you. Yeah, exactly. So we're talking about lack of responsiveness. Obviously, we can understand straight away that this can't be positive because we don't want to be apathetic towards our students. But I wonder really, when you think about perhaps even your own experiences, when you went through formal education, did you feel you were in a responsive environment? I don't know. I hope so. I didn't always feel like that. I really didn't. So this is something to think about. How can we make our students feel welcome, that they belong, and that we respond to their needs? So this can be done, as I said there, but both in a cultural sense, in a social sense, and also cognitively. So how can we do it? Well, for example, talking specifically about cognitively, how we can be responsive, if we adopt universal design for learning principles and practices, then we will design learning in a way that anticipates and removes barriers to learning. That's why we need to be intentional. We need to think about what could be the barriers and how can we remove them. We're going to provide, for example, voice and choice to students, variety, flexibility, etc. But it's also very important for us to be responsive in the right way, that we actually do needs analysis. Do we know our students? What do they need? What are their needs? How can we find out? And not just cognitively, but from a cultural viewpoint, how can we have culturally respectful pedagogies? So, oops, did something happen? Oh no, sorry, okay. So, I'm going to propose then that we listen to 2 case studies about being responsive. One case study is from Charles Wachira, who's joining us from the US. Thank you, Charles, because I know it's very early for you. And one is from Nokuthula Vilakati from Eswatini, who is not on a very different time zone from us. So thank you very much for joining us. So I've got a little slide introducing my colleagues here. So I'm going to just read it for the benefit of those who can't really see the slide perhaps or read it. And by the way, I've always added the Twitter handle because my colleagues said that they would be very happy for you to connect on Twitter. So Charles is the Director of Teaching and Learning at the Johns Hopkins Carey Business School in Baltimore, US. Yeah, he focuses on online learning, including course development, program production, and project management. His interests include exploring how education drives technology innovations and the impact that emerging technologies have on teaching, learning, and research. So Charles will discuss now and present a case study regarding the use of universal design for learning principles. This is to be responsive from, let's say, particularly from a cognitive viewpoint. So hi, Charles, I can see you. So I'm going to progress the slide and you tell me when you want me to go to the next one.
All right, thank you very much. And welcome to everyone on the audience, and we're very excited and delighted to join you and to participate in this. As Virna said, it's an international endeavor, and we're very pleased to be here. So when we think about universal design for learning, I usually like to focus on things we see in real life. So the question I usually pose is, why do we need, universal design for learning? And to better illustrate this, we should turn to everyday applications. So some of these applications have been implemented due to human development. So as we develop in technology, some of these improvements do happen in the public sector. Some of it has been in product research and development. So companies, organizations wanting to improve and offer better products to their consumers. Maybe it's a city government wanting to improve its town or city. And then, unfortunately, some of them happen due to lawsuits. So something happens, someone is injured, there's a lawsuit that turns into an improvement. So, some of these, think about public works, industrial design, infrastructure as you're traveling on the highways or, going in and out of shops. So there is a lot of examples, but for this purpose, let's focus on what we call the curb cut or a ramp entrance. So on the screen, I have 2 photos. One is under the standard category. So those are probably you've seen those types of designs where it's a regular curb, and the one that has undergone a universal design improvement, you can see that it's kind of cut in a way that it's level with the street, so it's easy to access. So this was the one that's labeled universal design. This was originally designed to assist people with disabilities so that they can access the curbs. And originally that design was placed in the parking lot, so close to where there was a handicap parking spot. But today these designs are all over, in the town, in neighborhoods. And today you can see maybe a parent with a baby stroller, and it's easy for them to access the street or access the curb. We see people with bikes. You can imagine if you have a bike and you're trying to access the one with a standard, you either get off the bike, or if you are innovative, you try to maneuver onto it. But bad things happen when you do that, right? And then small children as well can access the street easily. Or sometimes, if you're one of those weekend warriors, I know it's soccer season right now. So on the weekends you're playing soccer, you get injured and you're on crutches and you need to access the street. It will be difficult to use the standard model. So if you take those basic principles, that is the core of universal design for learning. So you take those universal design in day life application, where we're designing for all users, and you apply that to teaching and learning. And that is, in a nutshell, that's how universal design for learning works. If you could advance the slide.
Sure.
Thank you. So the case study that I'll be focusing on is video captions, right? So as an instructor applying universal design for learning, you would reflect on learner variability. So there's some research behind universal design for learning, and this is one of them. And learner variability is identifying or acknowledging that all learners are unique, kind of like a fingerprint, and the people learn in different ways, right? So some people are visual learners, others want to listen, others want to interact, they want to get in there, get dirty. So we learn in different ways. So designing curriculum with that in mind will allow for easy access and engagement for your students. So the use of captioning in videos will provide the learners with an option to engage the content. So as in the previous slide, as we saw, you had parents with strollers, we had people on crutches, people in bikes. Now with the videos, we're thinking of different ways when you would interact with captions. So, obviously people with disability, that does benefit them. But think of times when maybe you're in a loud environment, right? Sometimes you go to the gym and they have the audio off on the television, but you can see the caption, so you can follow along. Or maybe you're commuting, you're on the train, and it's loud, it's noisy. You put in your headsets, it's still noisy, but you can play the video of the lesson and just follow along by reading. And we also have students who, sometimes they are in a household where it's not conducive for learning for various reasons. And so, at night they can sit in a corner or and follow along. We also think about international students, where the world today is very global. We have students participating from all over the world, either in person or online. And sometimes the students they need to read those captions. Maybe the native speaker is speaking too fast, or the students can't follow along. So that does help. And also a new one that I have come to appreciate is note taking, right? Sometimes, the speaker is speaking, says a word that sometimes I may not comprehend what it means. I can pause, I can see maybe the spelling, and it also helps with note taking. So those are the benefits that you could get from something as simple as captioning the videos, where now it's not only benefiting the intended audience, the students with disability, but it benefits everyone. It also provides a very welcoming environment. When a student opens a video, sees their captions, sees their transcripts, it tells them that the instructor cares about our students, and that's at the core of universal design for learning.
Great,
So,
thank you.
sure. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Charles. That was so interesting. And in fact, I think the choice of captions is a very good one, because just this week I was at another keynote. I was following a keynote, and actually that's what was mentioned, that captioning has been one of the most difficult things to do.
Yep.
It can be time consuming, and we haven't probably really quite got it right. So it's an area that really going forward, we should try perhaps at institutional level to see how we can, combine forces and see how to improve this area. Because as you said, it will benefit a wide variety of students for different reasons, and even ourselves, it benefits us. So thank you so much for sharing that with us. Really nice and interesting. So we're going to pass now to Nokuthula, who also I call Tula. And she's currently undertaking a PhD in education research within the Centre for Innovation in Learning and Teaching at the University of Cape Town. Her research focus is on academic staff development for working on curricula for distance and blended learning environments. How apt. But she works for the University of Eswatini, where she has been part of a team undertaking a cross-national research project on rural student transition into higher education. How interesting. And Nokuthula will discuss and present a case study regarding the use of culturally respectful pre-course needs analysis. So we're still under the first R of being responsive. So Charles was really focusing on being responsive, let's say from a cognitive viewpoint. And now Nokuthula is more about being responsive from a cultural viewpoint. So I don't know whether Nokuthula is here. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Okay, I can hear you, but it's not very loud. I'm not sure if the others can hear you.
Hello, can you hear me now?
Yes. Yeah. Maybe try to speak nice and loud. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. Yeah.
I'll try and do that. Thank you, Virna. I'll just begin by acknowledging the comments on the chat when you pose the question. What it means to be the opposite of being responsive. And what stood out for me are the comments like being indifferent, being blind, and I'm even more curious, blind to what? And this is what the case study tries to focus on, to be culturally responsive in a way. The overarching aim of that case study is to look at treating the students that you have in a course as if they are homogeneous, they are one group, even if they are in the same country and they share the culture. Because the thinking we have is that if you do so, you are approaching it, or you are framing your learning design from a deficit approach, where you assume that the students will engage with the course the same way because they are the same group or something like that. Yet they are diverse, like we've heard from the previous case study by Charles. So what we then focused on was to borrow from asset framing, which is a cultural wealth model by Yoso, who shares with us that actually students draw from various forms of cultural capital, particularly the students from the rural areas as well, because the tendency is that when they come into higher ed, we tend to want to assimilate them to the dominant culture, if I may put it that way. Mm-hmm. So the way that we thought we could address that is to then undertake needs analysis, where you actually get to know the students individually as well as collectively. You do that by collecting the data with the intention. We are drawing from one of the values from Virna's tree, to be intentionally equitable, where the aim is to then address those barriers and remove some of them as much as you can, and rather look at the students as from the rural areas, for example, as problematic or not belonging. Rather, you look at them as high opportunity students, and then you apply inclusive pedagogies of care and universal design for learning principles as you design for their learning. Next slide, Virna.
Yeah.
Okay, what we did in the case study was to create a culturally inclusive student survey where we find out from each student what it is that would help them learn better in the course. For example, what they would like to be called, which in some cases may be different from the official name that they have in the university system, as well as their pronouns. How do they self-define? So we ask for that information as well. The next slide. Okay, the questions that we even of more importance to us are those where we ask them how do they identify culturally, self-identify culturally. And then we provide some examples, but they are open to include descriptors that make sense to them. Does religion matter to them, race, and so on, language, and any other aspect that stands out for them? And then when we now work with them in the course, we try to make sure that we respect. I remember one day making a comment where the student had posted how they relax, and they would say that they would go to the graveside, and that's how that's the most relaxing part to them. And I was like, I wouldn't do that myself. Fortunately, the facilitator removed my comment quickly because it would have been disrespectful. I mean, and so many other examples that come to mind. So if you design with this lens or frame of being culturally responsive and respectful, you are mindful of all of that. You are intentional in being inclusive and respecting a diversity of opinion, of cultural norms, values, and beliefs. Yeah, I think that's...
Thank you so much, Tula. Thank you. That was really interesting. I mean, these are ideas that I'd already discussed with Tula before, but actually even just listening again now, it's just so true. Sometimes I think in the UK, what happens is it's difficult to get to know students before they turn up. But that shouldn't really stop us, because, I mean, ideally, if we were able to get this information before we even meet the students, it's even better, because we can literally tailor the design of the course to these needs that we identify. But if that's just not possible, at least let's do it right at the start of the course. Let's get to know the students as quick as possible, as you know, as much as they want to share. Of course, this has to be something that they are willing, whatever they're willing to share. But I find that actually usually students respond really well to these attempts to get to know them, because they can see we are interested. So, like, for example, I say, you know, really, I would like to be able to tailor the course to your needs. So to create a class profile of some sort, understand who I have in the room. So please share whatever you are comfortable to share, and of course this is going to stay confidential. But thank you very much. But this is really about being responsive. Then that was the first R. So we saw the case study in the example of Charles with University Center for Learning, and for example using captioning. It's just an example. And then Tula has shared now about being culturally responsive by including cultural aspects in initial student surveys or needs analysis that we do at the start of the course. So thank you very much. So the next R is research rich. What does it mean? Of course, again, this could mean so many different things. But I think the way I'm using it is to clarify and engage with our evidence base. So clarify because, or perhaps investigate would be a better word. So who are our reference points? Are they all from the global north? Sorry for this, use of the word, but just for want of a better term, can we engage with the sources, literature, research from other places, and perhaps in new forms? I have been amazed by the quality and quantity of research that has been freely shared in this past year through podcasts, blogs that are very, very high level. And those are sort of new forms of research. Why not? And perhaps help our students appreciate that they can learn in those ways as well. So it's about letting research support the why and the way that we teach. And why does it matter? Of course, it's for professional effectiveness and growth. We want to do it well, and we want to grow as much as possible. So a little pause again here to think about what would be the opposite if our practice as teachers was not research rich. So what would it look like, or what would be the opposite? Any ideas you want to share in the chat, you're welcome. But I may have to come back to that just because I'm aware of time now. So just think about that. What would be the opposite of research rich? But I'm going to go ahead. So share in the chat if you want, and we'll come back to this. So how do we do it? Well, really, every teacher should be a researcher. But what happens if you're in an institution that is not research intensive? In the UK, this is the big thing. You're either in a research intensive institution or not. Your post or your role includes some research sort of allowance for research or not. So sometimes it's difficult. But what I'm suggesting here is that all of us, irrespective of where we work, can be a consumer and a producer of research. As I said, because there are new modes of research. It doesn't have to be high stakes with big funding. It can very well be small scale action research. Why not? Why don't we investigate our students, our courses, our classes, understand what's happening and how we can make that better, perhaps, if we cannot engage in something bigger. And the other aspect is students as research partners, part of being research rich. So we can engage in different types of research, but we can involve students in that research. And that becomes extremely enriching for everybody, because the students will gain experience of research. We will gain experience of understanding their perspective better. And this collaboration can actually lead to further, we don't know how far it can go. I noticed on your website, you have an internal undergraduate research scheme. Unfortunately, I was not able to access further details because I think it's part of your internal website. But I just wanted to mention, if most of you are from the University of Liverpool, that this actually exists internally. So if you have not engaged with it until now, perhaps something to look into or understand what is available. And as I noticed, I thought I would mention it. So we are now going to talk about one of these cases of students as research partners. And we are very fortunate to actually have not only the researcher talk about it, but the student as well. So that is fantastic. So we have here Cassandra Stevenson and Alice Kim from Canada. Again, this is their Twitter handle, so you're very welcome to connect with them. So Cassandra is a recent graduate of York University, holding a specialized honors Bachelor of Science in Psychology. Her career aspirations in clinical developmental psychology are rooted in collaborative research and equity, with a strong passion for accessible education. So again, very apt. And Alice is the Managing Director of Teaching and Learning Research in Action, a not-for-profit research organization focused on conducting and publicly disseminating research on teaching and learning. Her research is focused on factors that impact students' learning trajectories, including student engagement and application of cognitive learning principles in course design. So fantastic profiles, both of you. So Cassandra and Alice are now going to discuss and present a case study regarding their own experience of a small-scale action research while they implemented the students as partners model. So I don't know if you're both there, and I'm going to go to the slide, and I don't know who wants to speak first. But
Thank you so much, Virna. I want to start by saying that we're both really excited to be here to share our experience, not only about the research that we've been doing, but our experience of working together in this student-faculty partnership. And when we say students as partners, what we mean is that in this, it's a type of approach where students are being viewed as collaborators throughout the research process. So they help move the research forward by assisting with various components of the project, things that need to be done. But the important piece is that they're contributing meaningfully to the research. They're bringing their own perspective to the table. And for research on teaching and learning, this is invaluable because it's not just the instructors in this scenario, it's instructors and students. And the main thing here that I really like, especially working with Cassandra, is the co-creation of knowledge. So again, they bring their own piece to the table, and together we're coming up with ideas. It's not that the ideas are coming from one way or just the other. It's a co-construction that really makes it a really exciting and it's an engaging experience for both parties. I'm going to let Cassandra explain the figure we have on the slide because she actually made it.
Well, I made it with some help of some members of TLR, of Teaching and Learning Research in Action. But this just kind of shows the trajectory of student-instructor research partnerships, particularly the way mine and Alice's went. So the shape, first of all, is symbolic of the ongoing nature of these partnerships. So you can see in the right corner, in the bottom right corner there, we have a 3D version of our figure. And you can see there's a clear start and end point, right? So you start the project at one point or another. But as you kind of shift it into more of a sideways view, which is what you would see big in the middle there, an infinity symbol takes shape. So it just kind of shows that although these partnerships are beginning through collaboration through a single project, they're often going to grow and continue through ongoing collaboration on various projects and initiatives, and they become continuous, like our lovely infinity symbol. So that was the case for Alice and I.
So I want to share a little bit about how Cassandra and I met and how our partnership has developed. And I think it's been about 3 years now, or 4 years now. Yeah, time just goes by.
Yeah, 3 or 4. Yeah, time flies. Huh?
Wow. So we met, I was teaching a course on cognitive psychology, and Cassandra was one of the students in my course. And obviously it was very clear that she is a very bright individual. And she was interested in getting involved in research, and that's how our partnership began. And I want to say from the faculty perspective, one of the biggest benefits of working with students as partners is that you're engaged in mentorship while you're doing the research. And when this mentorship is included, a lot of things that you may take for granted come to light. So things that are implicit and things that are just things that you just really take for granted, you end up being more intentional and conscious of all the decisions you're making because you're having these ongoing discussions. And because of that, a lot of the times for myself, I think my decisions are better because I'm more thoughtful and a lot more conscious and a lot more conscious of anything I may be assuming and a lot more intentional about how I navigate through the research process. Another huge benefit is really, again, the perspective that my student partners bring to the table, particularly because I'm most interested in investigating teaching and learning practices. And especially working with Cassandra, I want to say again, it's a two-way dialogue. The first study that I worked on with Cassandra, we came up with the research question together. It's not that I spoke with Cassandra and told her what my research interest was. I mean, generally, we were working in this general domain of where my interests lie. But the question, Cassandra will disagree with me, but I actually believe that she came up with the first research question that we worked on. So it has really been an amazing experience. I'll let Cassandra share a bit about her perspective, though.
Yeah. So from a student perspective, there were, of course, being able to have that input in the research was really, really great. But I feel like for me, the biggest benefits were maybe a little bit more personal. When I first began working with Alice, of course, I was looking forward to learning some new skills, building research experiences, building up my CV for applying to grad school. All very important in contributing to this field that I really wanted to work in. It was very exciting, and I was able to gain all of that, but I was able to gain a lot more thanks to the way the relationship developed. So as an undergrad, I had a few research experiences, and I noticed a big difference between, sorry, my cat's just like, she loves the computer. I noticed a big difference between the experiences in which I was treated as kind of an assistant to the research versus a collaborator on a project. So when I was treated like an assistant, I kind of felt like I was more like blindly following instructions from someone in a higher position. My perspective wasn't really requested, so I felt like it was unwelcomed. I don't think it really was unwelcomed. I think if I had offered my opinion, I'm sure it would have been happily considered. But as an undergraduate, I didn't have a lot of confidence in my research abilities. And so I kind of presumed I should follow like a don't speak unless spoken to attitude. Obviously not healthy. So with this kind of collaborative approach that Alice introduced to me, she kind of helped me shape that attitude a little bit. So when she labeled me as a collaborator, she continuously asked for my input. She made me feel like my opinions and contributions were actually essential to the research we were doing. And these little actions helped me build a lot of confidence in my ideas. They allowed space for my curiosity to grow in a safe, judgment-free zone. They let me know that I can think of ideas on my own, and I can be a researcher too, rather than just kind of helping out. So since there was that active effort to make me feel competent and included, my sense of agency really improved in ways that I didn't get to experience in any roles prior. And that was one of the biggest significant benefits for me, was just curbing a lot of imposter syndrome that way.
Thank you so much. I think we have to go ahead, but really I want to clap, especially to actually having a real student, not a made up one, talking so positively about a research experience. I mean, we have to be realistic. Perhaps it's not always ideal. We don't live in an ideal world. But really, when you think about it, I'm talking about to all the teachers in the room. Imagine if all of us teachers were involved in, it doesn't matter what scale of research, but actually involved our students in that, as Alice and Cassandra were saying, not just for consultation once the plan has been set, but really, like it says, initiating that project together, getting, establishing the research question together, etc. So literally learning to do research together and exchanging the exchange that takes place. So it would be a very different world, yeah? So wonderful experience. Thank you very much. Really nice case study. Really appreciate that. So that was about the R of research rich. So research rich can be interpreted in so many different ways, but we just thought we would talk about a real case of students as research partners. So I'm going to go ahead now and talk about the last R, relevant. To be honest, this is quite similar, relates quite a lot to the first R, which was responsive, but perhaps slightly different. So what does it mean? Well, if something is relevant, you can imagine something relevant to you is something which connects with you, is appropriate. So in this case, connected and appropriate to the students in content and mode, and also relevant from macro to micro, because there's been quite a lot of, so from the sector, AHE sector, to the lesson level. So, okay, this now links to the next one. Why does it matter? Because there's been lots of questions in the past year now, particularly about the university's purpose and relevance. Are we still relevant as a sector? So we need to ask ourselves this: are we relevant? Within this, there's also the conversations about being culturally relevant, which is similar to what we were saying before. So decolonizing, for example. Now, I do not have time to go into this because of the time, but Amrita Narang has done some wonderful work. I've got the reference right at the end. She now works for Advanced HE only. I can't remember where she was before, but she's written quite a bit about decolonizing and presented as well. And she also offers a workshop, I think, about this. And I think these are conversations that are really important to have. How can we be more relevant? Because again, I'm going to ask you the question to think about. What's the opposite? I'm very sorry about the time, but if you want to put it in the chat, but just think about that. Irrelevant. It's really bad. It's really dangerous to be irrelevant. If we are irrelevant, why should students come to us? So we have to really think about this. How can we be relevant? Now, there are many ways of, in practice, being relevant. How can we do this? So I'm going to just give some ideas because, of course, we could talk a long time about this. But for example, the content of interest to the students, actually appropriate to the students. Bridging studies with wider world. Because we know our students through their phones, through networks they're in, they go through, they experience a lot of informal learning and very significant for them. Sometimes they work and study at the same time, a lot of the times actually. So how can we make those connections more obvious? So it's not just study and separate, work, let's say. So one way to do this, for example, is designing authentic assessment. I would like to say that on your website, the University of Liverpool website, it actually talks about, there is a section about authentic assessment. And it's got this definition: assesses students using tasks that mirror those they might undertake as professionals or citizens through choice of purpose, format, intended audience, resources, and collaborative or student-designed elements. That's a wonderful definition, and it's also got a video there. So if you have not looked at that, do check it out on your own website, because I think your university has already got this part of their, mission, part of your mission. But sometimes we've got so many things to address, so we might forget. But let's try and focus on the fact that we want to be relevant to the students. So I'm going to propose that we we listen to a case study from Camille. Camille is Dickson-Deane is joining us from Australia. Thank you so much, Camille, because it's very late for Camille. It's, I think, nearly 11 o'clock at night. I'm so sorry to keep you up. Camille is a senior lecturer. Really appreciate you joining us. Senior lecturer, higher education learning design at UTS in Australia. Her core research area includes how individuals' differences are influenced by the pedagogical usability of online learning environments. Again, how apt for our times. And she's an invited IBSTIPI scholar and elected member of the AECT board, and serves as editor of two top-tier journals, ETRND and JCHE. Well done. So Camille will discuss and present a case study regarding the importance of bridging studies and real life, the wider world, making learning relevant. So I'll leave the word to you, Camille.
Okay, thank you, Virna, and welcome everyone. So I'd like to just mention 3 questions before I start with my slide.
Sure.
When we talk about relevance, there are 3 questions that always guide my designs, and these are the questions I use. How would a student use this learning outcome in the real world? And that's when you're at the high level of your course design or your subject design, depending on where you are, right? So the overall goal of the course or the subject. Then I ask myself, the learning outcome is one part, but there's a skill and ability tied to that learning outcome. Where would the student use it? A lot of people don't realize that if they can't find a place in their mind to relate to where they would use it, your course has failed, right? And then what in their everyday context is easily accessible to the student to create a synaptic bridge between what they've learned in the discipline and the real world. That's scaffolding that we design in. So those are the 3 principles I use when I'm designing. So in my case study, and this is part of what Virna wasn't aware, I was pooling disciplines to see what was the main discipline in the room, and we all have in common learning design to some effect. So I'm going to use a learning design case because I think that's more relatable to everyone. So I do teach into a learning design master's program. Strategically, it's originally in the Caribbean. And from that perspective, even though I'm in Australia, I do the long distancing of I meet late at night, there early in the morning, vice versa. But having grown up in the Caribbean, I understand the relevance of what is happening in that environment, in that context, to ask the right questions. But because of the culture, which Tula intimated, sometimes it's difficult. So Charles talked about UDL. That's also difficult because in the Caribbean, learning design is still a new profession. So understanding universal or designing for everyone is not really part of the curriculum. And then talking about what Alice and Cassandra talked about, where you use students as partnerships. I think, can't remember who it was, who's also from the Caribbean. She would know our culture in the Caribbean is to sit down and listen and take notes. We don't participate readily in the classroom. So when I talk about relevance, I talk about all of those and how it makes an impact in what I deliver. So students need a reason to engage with the material you're providing them. So the way I do it is quite simple. I ask them what happened today in the news in the Caribbean, because I haven't been, I said, tell me what happened in the news. Lately, I don't know if you guys have read, there was an assassination in Haiti. From a Caribbean perspective, that will affect them differently. People will have all their different views. And that's an easy way to get Caribbean people to speak about their belief systems, what is happening in the region, what's going on around them, right? One example I did use some years ago, I don't know if you guys remember Miss Universe competition where it was Steve Harvey read the wrong name. I don't know if anybody remembers that. You know if somebody remembers that? He read the wrong name of who won.
Yeah, rings a bell.
Yeah. And in that class, we discussed for a long time whose fault it was. And I made it into a learning design problem. So that was my window to engagement. Next slide, Virna. So by engaging them in that Steve Harvey discussion, I kept telling students it's a learning design problem. Let's figure it out. I had them sit down peer to peer and start discussing it. And they were going back and forth. Now, remember, these are students who do not engage, right? But in the Caribbean, we do look at Miss World and we do look at Miss Universe and everything. So we were talking about that. Nobody could understand why I would say it was a learning design problem. And when you are doing peer-to-peer interactions, what happens is that they bring more of themselves into the conversation by asking each other more questions. So I use a lot of the Socratic method, questioning them as to, so what was written on the card? Do we know what was written on the card? Did the card have first place, second place, third place? Did the card just have names? Did the card just say, this is the first winner, read this card? What was on the card? No one knows. Was it his fault? Was it the designer of the card fault? Was it the person who spoke to him and gave it to him fault? What fault? Whoever the fault lie? And we had that conversation going, and it was an interesting conversation. Nobody understood it was how it related to learning design, but it still was. Next slide, please. And then through consistent practice of that kind of system in a class, guess what happens next lesson? They ask questions. They ask you questions and they keep going. And they say, well, this happened today. How is that relevant to what we learned today about scaffolding? I don't understand. I don't know if you guys know in the Caribbean, we have rolled out, we're moving on from O levels and A levels, and we're moving into CSEC a new time. How is CSEC so relevant now? We don't know. That became into a design issue, and we brought that into the classroom. So consistent practice of having these Socratic methods of asking questions about everyday living and how you feel fits into that living makes it very inclusive and very practical for normalized action.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Camille. Thank you so much. Can I just ask, I'm sorry, because I can't really see, do we have 3 minutes? Am I right?
You do have 3 minutes, but we'll give you a few more minutes to go over. But yeah, 3 to 5 minutes.
Okay, I'm so sorry because I really wanted to have about 10 minutes of questions and answers, but I think that might not happen. But if you have any questions, do put them in the chat. I'm just going to wrap up very, very quickly then. So to recap, really, just to recap, the 3 R's of inclusive learning design: responsive, research rich, and relevant. At the bottom of the roots of this design, really, let's check our values. And my suggestion would be, conclusion, really, keep calm and design more inclusive learning by keeping in mind these 3 R's. And you've had some examples today. Of course, there are many other ways of doing this. And you'll have the references when you get these slides. And because I'm sorry, with the time now, I really want to say a big thank you to my colleagues for joining from such different parts of the world. And if I'm just going to stop sharing it. If there's any question or any, I don't know how to stop sharing. Am I still sharing?
No, that's it now. We can see
you.
Good.
Thank you. If there's any question, I know we have very short time. I've not been able to look at the chat at all. But because I'm a little bit concerned if this is a break and I don't want people to miss their break. Yeah.
That's fine. Well, what we'll do, well, first of all, look, thank you ever so much, all of you, Virna, Charles, Tula, Cassandra, Alice, Camille, for joining us. And I think this just shows what can be achieved in a kind of distance model and a remote model, which would maybe be harder to achieve in a face-to-face environment. So thank you ever so much for the rich dialogue, the rich experiences that you've all shared. People do now have a break between here and 2:15, but we'll leave this open for people to ask you questions. If you can stay on for a little bit longer, that would be great. But other than that, I really want to kind of say thank you ever so much. So if we can do either physical applause or even virtual, it doesn't matter. But thank you ever so much.
I just orchestrated this, and I am indebted to my colleagues here. So I wanted to do, walk the walk a bit. So, include global colleagues, and you will see from my references as well, I tried to find sources from different parts, because sometimes, you have to maybe dig a little bit more, make a little bit more effort, but it's possible. So just as an example.
It is. No, it was a very, very rich tapestry of kind of case studies there, which was absolutely fantastic. So I'll leave colleagues now to stay around and ask you some questions. For those of you that need to get a break, please do. Sessions start again at 2:15 British summertime, just so we're not confusing some of our colleagues. And thank you particularly for, I think, Camille, who's probably had to stay up the latest for this. Is that correct?
Really, yes.
But really appreciate it. Thanks, everybody. And I think what we'll do, Virna, is we'll invite you back at some point, maybe with some colleagues, to focus specifically on certain areas, and we'll maybe have some more time for
questions. Exactly.
For questions.
I think people need a break. Definitely. Okay. Thank you. And so take care then. And thank you very much to all the people who helped me deliver this. Okay, bye then.
Bye. Thanks, everyone.
Cheers. Bye.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye.